your work in general, you focused a lot on the distinction between coercing someone's outward behavior versus the freedom of the conscience, and how those two kind of have to be held together in a Christian government. And a lot of your interviews and a lot of your podcasts, you're defending the outward coercion part because that's the part that's most foreign to modern American culture. But for those who sort of discovered the idea of Christian governance and perhaps were influenced by people like Catholic integralists or other sorts who are more open to just unrestrained use of force, describe the positive benefits of the freedom of conscience and why that isn't some liberal accretion, but actually sort of a standard part of how a Christian magistrate would operate himself.
Yeah, this is one of those things that literally for like 500 years, people have gotten wrong. And I don't mean the people who are like the Protestant, magisterial Protestants or any of the big names that you know among Reform group or just Protestants in general. The people who have contended for almost like a maximal religious liberty have gotten this question wrong for a long, long time. And it's very, very, very frustrating. In fact, I think James Madison got it wrong as well. And that is that they think that the issue between they think the issue of coercing religion or anything, they think the question is whether or not you can force people into the faith. And no one has ever, at least within Protestantism, I've never come across a single Protestant in the history of Protestantism who has claimed that you can actually coerce people into the faith, that you can force people to worship God in their heart, that you can force people into a certain belief. It's been denied by everyone, even, so Calvin denied it, Luther denied it, Rutherford denied it. Everyone denied that you could coerce internal belief. So everyone affirmed then a freedom of conscience regarding your inward belief. Okay. So interior to you, you have a freedom and you can come to believe this or that. It doesn't, whatever it is, you are free to believe that. You can't through law or through force or outward means coerce someone to the faith. It's always been that. So part of the frustration for the last 2 years has really been correcting the most basic point. And then I come to discover that actually like Rutherford was correcting the Baptists back then, and others were correcting this. And so it's just been a long time. So there's a lot of kind of ignorance on that point. So I do not affirm, and no one else affirm, that you could actually coerce faith, right? Now, but there is a distinction between your internal liberty and your external liberty. So your internal liberty is free. That's between you and God. That's conscience. And that's a space of reasons. So that's why when we give the gospel, it's like, hey, here's what God has said. You ought to believe this, and you give reasons for that, and blah, blah, blah. That's what you do. And you appeal to the soul, you appeal to the reason, you appeal to that sort of thing to get them to so that they would believe. But externally, the moment you say something outwardly, that becomes an external expression of a certain belief. And we actually suppress that today. Even with like freedom of speech laws, you can kind of say whatever you want, but in the end, if you say something that's deemed racist, guess what? All the forces are going to come against you to suppress that position. So everyone kind of believes in suppressing speech, even if it's not legal, like it's extra legal. But the moment it becomes external, that's something that can be regulated. And in fact, we don't have absolute freedom of speech now. And there's some sort of speech that you can actually be regulated and penalized for doing that. So there is that distinction, again, internal, external. And then the question of, so there is like that ultimate absolute good of the freedom of conscience internally. But then externally, that's where the question arises. So the question is, can a civil leader, civil ruler, politician, magistrate, whatever, regulate outward behavior, outward speech? That's ultimately the question. And in the American tradition, at the founding and since then, there was pretty much a broad religious liberty such that you could believe what you wanted to believe, but there was also a common understanding that we're a Christian nation and that sort of thing. So we have that tradition as Americans that if you are Baptist, Presbyterian, whatever, you can actually get along, you can be a part of the same political project and recognize each other's mutual faith and not call upon the magistrate to suppress that position. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a matter of the American tradition. What I try to emphasize is that we are inheriting a tradition of religious liberty that worked actually really well in the 19th century. And then it started to become eroded in the 20th century, and we can get into that as well. But that's kind of the basic idea. So I think just the main point is this: if you're going to attack me for some position on regulating religion, you have to get the question right. It's not a matter of internal liberty; it's a matter of the external license or liberty to say what you want. So
Right. So you would
hopefully
say
that
that,
gets at it. Yeah.
yeah, no, it does. So I think you would say that the reason that it would be immoral for the state to try to govern the conscience is because ultimately it just can't be affected by outward force. Not ultimately, you can try to scare it, but you can't really force it. And because you can't force it, it's kind of outside of the jurisdiction of the state, and therefore the state has to leave it alone. The
Right.
body
I
is in
mean,
the
yeah,
state, so the body has to
you
be.
could take it like factually and morally. So factually, the state can like it's like the state forcing you to like you must laugh or you must cry or you must feel this emotion now, like legislating that. Um, like can't do that. Same thing with belief. You can't command someone to believe someone and they actually believe it in their heart. Um, that there's and in a way you can't even kind of reach into someone's soul to determine whether or not they actually believe it, right? So and that's why even in like in Christian circles, when you go to become a member of the church, they can't assess whether you have true faith. They just assess whether you have a credible profession of faith, because they can't actually get into your soul to see if you truly believe. Same thing with the state. So that's like factually, but then morally, it's the fact that that is God's jurisdiction. Like you have immediacy between your conscience and God, and there's no mediator there. The state can't enter in and start mediating these beliefs, kind of like Rome kind of does that. Rome basically says you must believe this. They mediate truth um, by simply their authority. That's a sort of species of that. But you morally can't do it because that's God's domain. That's like so it's God's jurisdiction and not the state's. So that the state can only regulate outward behavior. As they say, it's like the God. You're immediately before God in terms of things of the soul, but for the things of the body, um, you are regulated via the state. So it's like God regulates you immediately through the state that you would do these certain things and not do these other things.
Okay.
So that's like the distinction. So there's a factual side and a moral side to it as well.